You wouldn't believe the big deal there is about it over here. It's a huge deal. Yeah.
Ooh, la la la. Right, you can.
It costs me more to go to bingo in a taxi than it actually costs me to go to bingo.
I don't know if that makes sense or if this
Depends on how much you love the bingo.
towards the other.
Yeah, it costs me more to get to bingo.
Laying down the dollar at the bingo hall.
Yeah, it's
wow. Okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Right, I think that's a good way to start the episode on taxis. So, well, obviously we'll do many episodes on things like taxis, but this is an episode in what month? April, where the deal is there's been a taxi ruling in the United Kingdom. And yeah, I was going to say, Michaela, Zoe, what's the big deal? I don't know. I know from my brother, taxis, you have to get an accessible taxi. So what my main thing I was thinking is, does this affect taxis that aren't accessible? What's the whole deal around this? Essentially, for people who don't know, all taxis have to take disabled people now, and they have to charge the same price as they would for a non-disabled person. So what I was going to ask you guys was, what are going to be the repercussions of this? And from my able-bodied perspective, I kind of want to know, does it affect taxis that can't take wheelchairs in them anyway?
To an extent, yes, because if you've got any sort of disability, this will protect you. Say you use a manual wheelchair and you want to get into a taxi and you're able to transfer, you're now entitled to that help from the taxi driver to transfer unless they have a medical exemption. And you're also entitled to travel in your wheelchair should you wish to. So before a taxi driver can insist that you get out of it, now that's not the case. You're legally entitled to travel in your wheelchair. So it will protect all disabled people. I've heard the horror stories of the charges. I experienced the horror stories of the charges. Unfortunately, this doesn't apply to Northern Ireland, so we're left without that protection. But yes, I think it's a huge step forward for the UK in terms of protecting disabled people's rights. But there's one small step and a big journey.
There's nearly one small step for man, one giant leap for wheelchair kind.
I was going to say, maybe it's one small wing forward.
Oh, we like that.
Maybe.
So essentially, the big difference is here is if it's a taxi that can accommodate wheelchairs, then they have to let them in without folding them up or asking people to get out or anything like that. That's the addition for those ones too.
That and because they're not allowed to charge more because you're disabled.
Yeah. And Zoe, what's been your experience of this? Have you been charged more because of your wheelchair?
I have, and actually in a way that I don't think the current legislation actually reflects. So, because I live in London, and most of the time when you hail a cab, it's just a cab off the street. It's not a private hire vehicle. So you don't do the thing where you agree the fare beforehand. It's just a metered fare, which is fine because all Hackney cabs in London have to be accessible by law. But the issue that I've found is that the taxi drivers will often leave the meter running while you get in and out of the taxi. So they pull up, switch the meter on, then they have to come around, get the ramp out, sometimes get the ramp extenders out, boot if it's a steep incline, get you in, get you turned around and belted up and locked in, put the ramp away, and that whole time the meter is running. And then it's the same at the other end. So you end up being charged sort of £5-6 as a sort of flat rate just to get in and out of the taxi before you even get started. And then that kind of situation isn't covered by the legislation because it doesn't really cover metered fares. They have to pick you up by law, but there's nothing that would stop them from basically adding that extra charge on because they have to assist you in and out of the cab, particularly if they're not used to it and it takes them longer than it should. And I've definitely had that before where I've been sort of waiting on the pavement for 5 minutes or so while the taxi driver figures out how to get the ramp out and all of that kind of thing. It's a great piece of legislation and it's really going to help a lot of people in the private hire space. But hailing a cab on the street is still, I think, subject to a few little loopholes and little grey areas where you might indirectly end up being charged more as a wheelchair user or as anyone who requires kind of additional assistance to get in and out of the cab if you have a lot of luggage or any of those kinds of things, you're going to end up attracting an extra charge. Now, whether that's reasonable or not is kind of debatable. For me, I think it certainly irritates me, particularly, as I say, when cab drivers don't really know what they're doing, and so it takes them long just because they're a bit new or a bit incompetent, maybe, and that annoys me when I have to pay for that. But the idea that they can charge more just by merit of you being a wheelchair user, I mean, I'm really glad that that's been addressed with this legislation.
Yeah, and just to get this clear then, so if you're on the street, you just finished work, you want to go somewhere that you want a taxi for, you hail a cab, the cab stops and gets wheelchair stuff out. If you then finally get into the cab and you notice the thing's been running, he's been clocking up time as he was getting it already, what should a wheelchair user do in that? Is it against the law to have done that?
It's not against the law, no. And in fact, the law does specifically allow for the meter to be run from the moment that the cab stops to pick you up to the moment that the cab departs from dropping you off. That's how the fare is calculated, which makes a lot of sense most of the time. But when you've got this extra kind of few minutes either end where you are being assisted into the cab, the law says they can charge you for that at the moment, and it's a little iniquitous to me.
And this is where I thought, when I was reading through the article, and I kind of thought, so it really is focusing on the idea that that they are sure they're charging extra to get someone in and out of the car, but then it's focusing on the idea that they're going to charge an extra fare anyway just because someone has a disability.
Well, where it's come from is so most private hire fleets will have one or two accessible vehicles, and because they're accessible vehicles, they're normally larger. They're probably people carriers or MPVs, and so they charge a higher rate because it's a larger vehicle. But because those larger vehicles are only designed to take wheelchairs, then it becomes indirect discrimination, because actually what they're charging for is a vehicle big enough to put your wheelchair in. The wheelchair user isn't specifically requesting this big van. It just happens to be the only one they could use. So you had a lot of cases where people were being charged sort of 15-20% more because they wanted this bigger vehicle.
Yeah.
And you can understand where it comes from, because it does cost drivers more, it does cost taxi firms more to have these vehicles on fleet, and they need to recoup that somehow. But passing that cost on to the disabled customer is not fair. So the idea is then that they can no longer say, oh, you want this wheelchair accessible vehicle, therefore it's going to be £25 as opposed to the £15 it would be if we sent,
it should be like health insurance, just completely up everything, make disabled people pay for it.
I think that's the thing. It's going to, there is a danger here that taxi fleets will say, well, fine, we're not going to have accessible taxis, which I can understand to your point. However, if you're going to decide to have a public service, you've got to serve all of that public, and that includes disabled people or people with assistance dogs or another assistance animal. Some people have assistance cats. I know I have a friend with an assistive monkey, so it's about serving all of your public and making sure that that accessibility is there without passing on that extra cost. And that's the problem in Northern Ireland. They are still allowed to say, well, you're paying for the vehicle. And I to a degree can understand that, but it's still unfair. It's still, it's not my choice to be disabled, but it is my choice to go out tonight and spend a bit of money. The more they charge fairly, I think the more disabled people will actually use their services.
Yeah. I will say, why do you think this happens? Is there a sense, because I'm thinking it about from my brother's perspective, he gets all his taxis paid for. Is there a misunderstanding that maybe the people, taxi drivers thinking, oh, well, it's coming from the government anyway, they're gonna, get a receipt or whatever? Does the reality of the situation need to be communicated? Is that going to change things?
I think, to be honest, maybe this is cynical, but the fact that the government pays for a lot of disabled people's taxis is potentially an incentive or a way that drivers can charge more, because local authorities tend to be a little less, they scrutinise prices a little less, and they just kind of go with this will meet the needs of this person, therefore we will do it, rather than thinking about what's cost effective or what's or challenging those prices. So I think it's possible that this has been allowed to go on by the fact that 90% of wheelchair accessible taxi journeys are paid for by the local authorities to get kids to school or get people to medical appointments. So maybe it's actually the case that that's kind of perpetuated that ability to charge more, and what we're seeing now is we're kind of clamping down on that. Well, hopefully we'll save councils a bit of money as well if they don't have to pay so much for these services. But we'll see.
Let me say this. I was doing a little bit of scouting yesterday, kind of a media scout, and I came across an article where a woman had her mobility card took off her. We still call them mobility cards. I don't know if they're PEP cards now. But it was taken off her in favour of them paying a taxi for her to go to work. Over the course of a year, the card would cost the government £8,000, but over the course of a year, the taxi cost £5,000. And that just makes no economic sense to me. And it was the same for me. Rather than pay the diesel allowance and foot the bill for the petrol, they would pay for me to take a taxi, which would be £100 a day for me to go to university, and that doesn't make economic sense either. There's a lot of questionable decision making sometimes, and I think we need to look at where we spend our money. But I think this is a step towards spending it in the right places. Certainly the government come under a lot of flack, but I think in cases like this is where spending reform does actually benefit not just the government, but disabled people as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely one of those cases. So it sounds like there's still a lot of work to be done, but this is moves in the right direction. Thanks for watching, guys. And I don't know, maybe if you've got some of your experiences, what's it like in America? What's it like in Australia? What's it like in France? Tell us, let us know. Are you getting mugged off? Yeah, let's do something about it. Yeah, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.